Hi everybody, this is Aaron from Explosions Incorporated. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about how attitudes towards science and a general mistrust of science are being reflected in pending legislation here in the US. Recently, the House passed a bill called the EPA Science Advisory Board Reform Act of 2013. It was sponsored by the GOP and it passed 229 to 191, which is pretty much along party lines. The Science Advisory Board, what it does is it reviews the quality and relevance of the science used by the EPA. It also provides science advice to the EPA administrator, and it advises the agency on scientific matters. So it doesn't weigh in on specific pieces of legislation. Rather, it analyzes the research that goes into those pieces. Currently, it has 51 members, 3 of which have industry expertise. That means that they worked in the industries regulated by the EPA before sitting on this board. The changes proposed by this bill would affect the makeup of this board, mostly by affecting the rules about disclosure in 2 ways, basically. So it would make it a lot easier for an industry expert to sit on this board, even if there was a conflict of interest. Let's say they would benefit monetarily by a piece of legislation not passing. As long as they disclose this, they could still sit on the board and be a part of the process that would review the research that went into it. The other part of this is actually more insidious and a little bit scarier. The bill would also act to exclude other experts whose research is being reviewed or evaluated, even if their work is only one of hundreds being considered. So let's say there is a researcher and she is the leader in her field, and her paper is being reviewed along with 99 other papers as part of this process. She would have to recluse herself. The upshot of this is that it would cut down on the number of the people who are the most qualified to be discussing these matters, while increasing the number of people who might have conflicts of interest by actually being beholden in one way or another to the industry that is being regulated. Now, no doubt, we need industry experts sitting on this board. The EPA is regulating a very large industry, and it can be confusing how it works sometimes. The language of the bill itself doesn't seem earth-shattering. The problem comes when you start investigating the intentions behind the bill and investigating the sponsors of this bill. For example, Representative Chris Stewart, a Republican from Utah, he wants more industry experts. He is on record saying that he wants the EPA completely defunded. In time, he thinks that it is just strangling energy concerns here in America, and it would be better not to have a regulatory agency. Perhaps we just have Captain Planet and the Planeteers, but he seriously would like the EPA just to go away, and he is one of the sponsors of this bill. See, this is a growing trend in the House right now. Increasingly, positions of power concerning science research and funding are being controlled by people who are openly mistrustful of science, or maybe just woefully misinformed as to the process of scientific inquiry. For example, Paul Brown, a representative from Georgia, he's a ranking member of the House Science Committee. He's on video declaring that evolution, embryology, and the Big Bang Theory are all lies straight from the pit of hell. That's actually a quote from him. Also, used to be on that committee was Todd Akin. You may remember him. He made some comments about legitimate rape and about how women's bodies have a way of shutting that down. I'm not going to go into tearing those things apart, because it's just insane. It's been done. These people are wrong, whether willfully or otherwise. That is terrible, terrible science. Let's get back to that EPA bill. It did pass the House. It may not pass the Senate, and even if it does, chances are the president would veto it. So it's not like this is about to become law. The problem, though, as I see it, is this underlying attitude, this dismissiveness of science, a mistrust of scientists, this misunderstanding, willful or otherwise, of the process of science and the value of the scientific method. I fear that these challenges to the validity of science, they stem not only from a wacko, or 20 some of them in Congress, but they form a prevailing attitude in America that's expressed in the election of people who also represent these views. And if that attitude, this mistrust and dismissiveness towards science continues in the American people, it will continue to be reflected in our government. I don't want to make it seem like this is all doom and gloom. Recently at a meeting of the Planetary Society, Representative John Culberson, also Representative Lamar Smith, who just happens to be the House of Representatives Chairman of Science, Space, and Technology. Both of them are really behind funding a mission to Europa to study the possibility of life existing underneath the ice there. So it's not like it's all the sky is falling. There are definitely people out there who want to continue, especially in the way that we are, to continue funding science and science research. So what do we do? You know, how do we fix this problem? It may seem trite, but really the answer is to stay curious, to stay informed, to stay involved in this process. We need to be aware of what science is doing. We need to be aware of what the government is doing, and especially where these two things intersect. And I understand that it seems sometimes to me like my voice gets drowned out by moneyed interests and super PACs and corporations who mysteriously have the same individual rights as me. But when it comes down to it, we all have a say in what the government does. We have the vote. And if we choose to use that vote, it will be counted, and that is the only thing that will actually make the difference. Well, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope all of you have a wonderful holiday weekend, and we will see you guys next week with more science. Take care.